Kamikaze Chris wasn't just a Street Outlaws legend, he was the fearless racer who lived for the rush, carried Flip's Elko like a piece of his soul, and built his whole life around those streets. But the night that car flipped didn't just destroy the Elko, it destroyed the life Chris had spent years building. The crash drained his money, sparked a lawsuit he never expected, and hit him so hard he later admitted it felt like they took everything. His house, his savings, and the future he thought he had locked in. Fans kept asking why he vanished, and now the truth is finally surfacing. What really happened to Kamikaze Chris? How did one lawsuit wipe out everything he owned? And what is he doing now to rebuild his entire life from scratch? The real story is nothing like what you saw on TV. Watch till the end, because most people miss the part that changes everything. Kamikaze Chris didn't fade out of Street Outlaws. He vanished in a way that felt wrong from the very first moment. One week he was flying down the list in the Elko with that wild, fearless confidence only he had, and the next, he was gone without a single word. No farewell episode, no explanation from Discovery, no update from the crew, just silence, the kind that makes fans feel like something bigger was being hidden. People started digging because the timing didn't make sense. Chris disappeared right after the crash that nearly killed him, destroyed Flip's legendary Elko, and pushed him into the kind of financial and legal trouble he never imagined. Rumors exploded, some saying he was hurt worse than he let on, others whispering about a quiet lawsuit draining his money, and a few insisting Discovery cut him loose the moment things got messy. But the real reason he vanished runs much deeper than a wreck or a rumor. Behind the scenes, Chris was fighting the kind of battle that doesn't show up on TV, the kind that hits your money, your stability, your pride, and your entire identity all at once. He didn't leave because he wanted to. He left because life hit him harder than any racer ever did. And the deeper you dig into his story, the more you realize this wasn't a disappearance, it was a collapse nobody saw coming. Long before the cameras, the races, or the wreck, Kamikaze Chris was shaped by a man who lived life at full throttle, his father. People know Chris for his fearlessness, but they rarely understand where it came from. His dad wasn't just a racer, he was a force of nature who mastered anything with an engine. Bikes, boats, cars, if it moved fast enough to be dangerous, he could control it. And he pushed Chris into that world before most kids even learned how to ride a bicycle. Growing up under a father like that meant two things. You learned courage early, and you didn't get away with excuses. Chris wasn't just taught how to race, he was trained. His dad was strict, relentless, and refused to let him cut corners. If Chris made a mistake, he learned from it the hard way. If he hesitated, he lost. And if he ever slipped from what he was taught, his father made sure he corrected it. That intensity became the backbone of who he was on the streets. But there was another layer, one that cut much deeper. When Chris lost his father at just 44, it left a hole that never really healed. That loss bonded him even more tightly with the only two people who truly understood him, Big Chief and Flip. They weren't just friends, they were brothers shaped by the same streets, the same adrenaline, the same father figure who pushed all of them toward the life they eventually chose. And that foundation is important because it's the reason Chris raced the way he did, the reason he bonded so fiercely to the Elko, and the reason the crash didn't just break a car, it broke a part of the identity he spent his entire life building. But Chris had no idea how much that early training or that early loss would matter later, especially when everything began to fall apart. Long before cameras caught him flying down back roads at impossible speeds, Chris had already built a reputation that followed him everywhere he went. He didn't choose the nickname Kamikaze, it was given to him because nothing about the way he lived, drove, or thought fit the word safe. As a kid, while most people were learning to ride a bike, Chris was already pushing machines faster than they were meant to go. He craved danger the way other people craved comfort. Fear never slowed him down, if anything, it pushed him further. That reckless courage only grew stronger when he started riding with Big Chief and Flip. The three of them would spend entire nights chasing races, tuning engines, and teaching themselves how to control chaos. And no matter what, they raced a bike, a junkyard project, or something barely held together, Chris pushed it harder than anyone else. He didn't calculate risk. He became the risk. The name Kamikaze was more than a nickname, it was a warning. He drove like someone who didn't believe in limits. Every race felt like a dare, every run like a test of how far he could go before something snapped. It wasn't showmanship, it wasn't ego, it was who he was, shaped by a childhood built on speed, loss, and a father who believed courage mattered more than comfort. And that fearless identity is exactly why fans were shocked when he disappeared. A man who raced like he was unbreakable, suddenly gone without a trace? It didn't fit the story everyone thought they knew. But the cracks in that fearlessness, the ones nobody saw, were already forming long before the crash that changed everything. The El Camino wasn't just another race car, it was a piece of history, a piece of brotherhood, and the last physical connection Chris had to one of the most important people in his life, Tyler "Flip" Pretty. When Flip passed away, the loss didn't just break their crew emotionally, it changed the way Chris looked at racing forever. That car became more than steel and horsepower. It became a tribute, a responsibility, and a promise to keep their fallen brother's name alive on the streets they once ruled together. Most fans never realized how deep the bond ran between the three of them. Chris, Big Chief, and Flip grew up on the same roads, built the same dreams, and learned from the same father figure. They weren't just racing partners, they were family forged by adrenaline and shared scars. So, when the Elco ended up in Chris's hands after Flip's death, it wasn't handed over casually. It was trusted to him because he was the only one reckless enough, loyal enough, and fearless enough to drive it the way Flip would have wanted. Chris didn't just rebuild the Elco, he lived in it. Every detail mattered. Every run felt personal. Every victory felt like honoring someone who should have still been beside him. Fans saw a driver pushing a crazy build to its limit. Chris saw a friend's dream that he was determined never to let die. And that emotional weight is what made the crash years later so devastating. Because when the Elco was destroyed, Chris didn't just lose a car, he lost the last piece of Flip he could still hold on to. That's why his disappearance after the wreck felt like more than a racer stepping away. It felt like a man losing the one thing that tied his past, his purpose, and his identity together. The Elco wasn't just a vehicle, it was the heart of everything Chris stood for. And losing it was the moment the downward spiral truly began. By the time Kamikaze Chris hit Street Outlaws in Season 3, he wasn't just another racer trying to prove himself, he was a storm arriving on the list. Viewers didn't need multiple episodes to understand who he was. One pass in the Elco was enough. His driving style didn't look calculated or cautious. It looked like someone who had rather lose control than lose a race. That raw, chaotic, fearless energy is exactly what made him stand out in a lineup full of seasoned, disciplined drivers. Chris treated every race like it was a personal challenge, not against the opponent, but against the limits of the car itself. He tuned the Elco in ways most people wouldn't dare. He trusted the machine like it was an extension of his own body. And when he let off the brake and hit the throttle, fans got that rare feeling that anything could happen: victory, disaster, or something in between. That unpredictability is why viewers loved him. He didn't race to be safe, he raced to be unforgettable. Behind the scenes, even the veteran racers respected what he brought to the show. His work ethic was non-stop, his mechanical understanding was instinctual, and the emotional weight of carrying Flip's car only pushed him harder. Every run was a tribute, and every win felt like Flip was right there beside him. But that intensity had a downside. Chris wasn't the type to step back when something felt off. If the Elco rattled, he pushed it harder. If a part felt wrong, he convinced himself it would hold for one more race. The pressure to honor Flip, to live up to the nickname Kamikaze, and to prove he belonged on that list made him ignore warnings most drivers would never gamble with. And that's where everything began to tilt. Because that fearless rise, the energy that made him a fan favorite, was the same force that pushed him straight toward the night that changed everything. The night when the Elco reached its limit, and so did he. The night Kamikaze Chris crashed, the Elco wasn't just another Street Outlaws wreck, it was the moment his entire life split in two. On camera, it looked like a violent accident. Off camera, it was the start of a collapse he never saw coming. Chris had noticed something was wrong with the drive shaft earlier that day, but in true Kamikaze fashion, he pushed the thought aside. He had raced through worse. He'd handled crazier. One more pass wouldn't break him, or so he thought. But the moment he hit the throttle, the Elco reminded him that even legends have limits. The car snapped sideways, lost grip, and slammed into the barricade with a force that made everyone watching hold their breath. When crews rushed over, they didn't know if they were pulling out a man or a memory. Somehow, almost unbelievably, Chris survived. But survival came with a price. The Elko wasn't just damaged, it was destroyed beyond saving. Flip's legacy, years of work, thousands of dollars, and the heart of Chris's racing identity were gone in seconds. What fans didn't see was the impact that hit him the moment the adrenaline faded. Losing the Elko meant losing his purpose, his confidence, and the last physical link to the friend who shaped his entire racing life. And right behind the emotional heartbreak came something even worse, the financial and legal fallout that followed the crash. Bills he wasn't prepared for, costs he couldn't avoid, and the beginning of a lawsuit that would slowly drain everything he had left. That wreck didn't just take out a car, it took out the foundation he had been standing on for years. And from that moment forward, nothing in his life on or off the streets would ever be the same. Just when it looked like Kamikaze Chris had been pushed too far to ever return, he did something that reminded everyone who he really was. He didn't disappear to quit, he disappeared to rebuild. And not just his career, but his entire life from the ground up. With the Elko gone, his savings drained, and the lawsuit still clawing at him, Chris had every reason to walk away from racing forever. Instead, he did what only a true racer would do. He went straight back to the garage. His first move shocked fans who managed to find him online. He started picking through what remained of the Elko, the twisted metal, the shattered pieces, the scraps most people would throw away, and he began selling the surviving parts. Not to profit, but to fund his comeback. The few components that made it through the crash sold fast, especially with his autograph on them. Those sales brought in nearly $20,000, the first real spark of hope he had had since the accident. Then came the biggest twist. Friends from up north reached out and offered him a chance at a new beginning. A heavily modified C7 Corvette, a monster of a car with enough potential to get him back on the streets where he belonged. Chris didn't hesitate. He bought it, hauled it home, and started tearing it apart piece by piece until it fit his vision. Viewers who followed his YouTube channel, Kamikaze Life, started seeing the transformation, the long nights in the shop, the welding, the tuning, the endless hours of work that reminded them of the old Chris. And then, he made an announcement that fans had been waiting years to hear. He is rebuilding the Elko. Not a tribute, not a replica. The real thing, resurrected from the wreckage. It won't be easy, it won't be cheap, and it won't happen fast. But Chris isn't doing it for the fame or the cameras. He's doing it because the Elko wasn't just a car. It was Flip. It was his past. It was his identity. And it was the part of him the crash tried to take away. The comeback isn't complete yet, but it's happening. And for the first time since the night everything fell apart, Kamikaze Chris finally looks like a man fighting his way back toward the life he almost lost. Today, Kamikaze Chris isn't hiding, broken, or sitting in the shadow of what happened. He is rebuilding his entire life, one bolt, one weld, and one late night in the shop at a time. After the crash, after the lawsuit, after losing his house and the savings he spent years stacking, Chris went back to the only place that ever made sense to him, the garage. That's where he's been grinding ever since, far away from TV cameras, cutting through metal and pressure with the same stubborn fire that made him a legend on the street. He now runs his own auto shop full-time, doing custom builds, high-performance work, and the kind of insane projects that remind people exactly why he earned the name Kamikaze. And while he is rebuilding his career on the ground, he is also building it online. His YouTube channel, Kamikaze Life, has become the place where fans finally see the unfiltered version of him. The raw garage nights, the new Corvette build, the failures, the small wins, and the first glimpses of what his future might look like. But the biggest news is the one fans waited years to hear. Chris is officially rebuilding the Elko. It won't be quick and it won't be cheap, but he's doing it anyway because that car wasn't just a machine. It was the last piece of Flip he had left, the heart of his old life, and the symbol of the brotherhood that shaped him. Rebuilding it is more than a project. It's a promise. He is still living in Oklahoma, raising a newborn, balancing long days at the shop with longer nights under the hood, and quietly preparing for something bigger than anyone realizes. In recent videos, he made it clear he's still part of Street Outlaws, just inactive until the new build is ready. He hasn't retired, he hasn't given up, and he definitely hasn't disappeared for good. Kamikaze Chris is rebuilding his life, his legacy, and the one car that defined them both. His comeback isn't finished, but the man fans worried they lost is still very much here, fighting his way back one piece at a time. For most racers, a crash is a setback. For Kamikaze Chris, it became the dividing line between the life he once lived and the one he's fighting to rebuild. But what he didn't realize is that the years he spent tearing down streets with Flip and Big Chief, the risks he took, the loyalty he carried, the way he turned a rough childhood into raw fearlessness created a legacy far bigger than any episode of Street Outlaws. Even after disappearing from TV, his name never stopped circulating. Fans kept asking about him. Old clips of the Elko kept resurfacing. New viewers discovered the show and instantly wanted to know, where's Kamikaze? What really happened to that guy? That kind of impact isn't accidental, it's earned over years of authenticity, passion, and driving like a man who didn't know how to hold back. What makes his legacy powerful isn't just the races he won, it's the life he lived behind them, the brotherhood with Flip and Chief, the courage he inherited from his father, the way he carried a friend's memory on every run, and the honesty he shows now, rebuilding from nothing and letting people see the struggle instead of hiding it. That's why his story still matters. If Chris had walked away quietly, people might have forgotten him, but he didn't. He fought through heartbreak, broke through the lawsuits, rebuilt what the crash took, and never let the weight break him completely. Now, with a new build in the garage and the Elko slowly coming back to life, his comeback is shaping into something bigger than a return to racing. It's becoming the final proof that you can lose everything and still find your way back. His legacy isn't the wreck, it's not the lawsuit, it's not even the disappearance. It's the fight he showed afterward, the kind of resilience that turns a street racer into something unforgettable. If you're still here, you already know Kamikaze Chris's story is way bigger than a crash or a season of TV. And trust me, what comes next is even crazier. So, before you go, make sure you hit that subscribe button, drop a comment, and share this video so more people finally hear the truth about what he's been fighting through. And remember, the comeback he's building right now, you don't want to miss the moment he brings the Elko back to life. Stay connected, you'll want to be here when that engine fires up again.